Hi, and welcome to the Reclamation Project podcast. We are so glad that you're here, that you're listening, and hopefully that you are a part of the conversation. Today, we're jumping into a new subject, and that subject is fear. I think fear is something we all deal with. It's something we all have that resonates with us, that maybe we all move through in seasons or in periods of our life. And I think it's really something that we need to talk through. There's fears that all of us have, and personally for me, I've had fear a lot lately, fears of failure, fears of finances. You know, as I've talked about with my wife going home and working from home, is this really going to mess up our finances? Fears of parenting wrong. I think we all have that, where we don't want to mess up our kids, and we don't want the things that we do, the things that we say, to really cause them pain down the road, to where they have to go through things like therapy and get it all straightened out. We don't want our kids to have to go through some of the things that we've gone through in life. And so there's a fear of, how do I keep my kids safe? How do I keep them from going through these pains and these hurts? And how do I make sure that I'm not inflicting it on them? Those are some fears that I've had, and along with that, fear of failure. Is how do I not fail, not hurt my family? There's a ton of fears out there, and fears are not fruitful. They're not things that help us out. They're things that hinder us. They can paralyze us to a certain respect. They can keep us from moving forward and from growing and from changing and from becoming the best versions of ourselves. And so I really think that fear is a spirit that we need to really just walk through and navigate through and figure out, how do we get rid of fear?
You know, and it's such a big subject. It's even covered in Scripture. In 2 Timothy, Paul's talking, and he just got done saying that we're to have joy, and we're to live a life of faith, and that we should fan the gift that God has given us. And then he sticks in a verse that really just doesn't seem like it fits in all that positive talk about joy and moving forward. He said, "For God has given us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control." And that self-control also talks about how we think about things. So, and to your point, Jeremy, some of your fears, psychologists have determined there are really 5 types of fear. Some of them, well, fear of death, everyone has that. I mean, if you've been born and you know it's only a vapor on this planet, then you do have a little bit of a fear of death. So we won't spend much time there. And then there's the fear of autonomy, or not being able to do what you want to do. I don't think that in this country we experience that much, but I think the 3 big fears that I think a lot of our fears fit into are the fear of pain. In fact, every one you mentioned was pain. The emotional pain, of being physical pain, financial pains. All of those fit into the pain. And I don't know about you, but I'm just a big baby. I run from pain. If I have a splinter, I call 911. That's the kind of big baby I am. And yet pain does serve a purpose. Then the other fear is the fear of abandonment and rejection. And man, that's a big one. I would think 85% of the people I counsel struggle with that one. And then the last one, which I think really goes hand in hand, is the shame, the fear of shame and worthlessness, where you ask the question, am I good enough? Am I worthy? And when you don't feel that fear will ruin jobs and personal health and relationships. So I think we all struggle with that at some point. Having 2 daughters that passed away, I'll tell you that my first daughter passed away, and it was just a series of fevers. We'd go to the doctor, and he'd say, give us an antibiotic. As it happened through the progression of a year before she passed, then we had my oldest daughter that I have now, and you can imagine every time she got a fever. So, when you teeth, you get a fever. Mm-hmm. When you get the flu, you get the fever. Every time she got a fever, paranoia stuck, and it drove us. The fear of losing again was really debilitating. I mean, you're a parent. I'm sure you've felt things like that.
Yeah, I mean, my son's had croup many times, probably 4 or 5 times in his first few years, and every time he coughs, every time someone coughs around us, I become helicopter parent, and it's like, okay, hey, let's go run and get in a bunker and stay away from everything and anyone.
The boy in the bubble.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So as I see and hear people getting sick around me, my instant thought is, okay, this is going to be a $300 visit to Phoenix Children's Hospital, urgent care, and we're going to have to go through a week of him being sick and being home. And I tell you what, the other part of that fear is when he does have croup is at night when he coughs, it is a cough that just makes you think he's suffocating.
Yeah.
And so I become, awake at night. I'm restless. I don't sleep because every time I hear a cough, I want to check on him. I want to make sure that he's all right. And so that fear comes out instantly is those things are going to happen when I hear people coughing around me. So let's, put him in a bubble.
Yeah.
Let's make sure he doesn't get sick.
Yeah. And we know how well that works for us.
Right.
which to our point is fear drives us. And I think you can't have two competing driving forces, a force of fear that drives you one way and the force of confidence and that God's in control. That's where he said, I give you a spirit of power and of love and self-control. The other real important fear to be determined is, I think, the fear of abandonment and rejection. And really that comes in three different ways, either death, divorce, just disinterest by a parent. Once you've been shunned a little bit, and it really writes on your hard drive, and when you feel that, it's a feeling that you don't ever want to repeat. I think, and I hate to always rationalize or generalize, but when I deal with a lot of women, I would bet over half of the women I deal with suffer from this fear here. That they've been divorced, cheated on, left. One girl was left on top of a mountain when her boyfriend broke up with her. She has a fear of commitment. No kidding. Abandonment really is it's devastating, paralyzing.
Well, and I know people who have had parents who have gone through divorces, messy breakups. They've felt abandoned by one parent or the other, and that's impacted their relationship, that they're either A, more cautious, or B, they gravitate towards the same person that left them.
Yeah.
The same characteristics. And I've seen both kind of blow up because either you're so on edge that you don't have any relationships, you become isolated, you become to a point where you don't let anyone in and you don't have any depth to those relationships. And then those same people wonder why they can't find anyone. And then you have the second person who gravitates towards the things that abandoned parents embodied, those characteristics, who they were, and then they find the same pain in that. Yeah. And so I think that abandonment's huge in today's day and age because we have more and more parents who aren't involved and more kids who are doing one of those two things as they grow up, looking for those characteristics, looking for that validity in someone else, or they shun the world. And so that's a huge one that I think a lot of people go through. And to a certain extent, even if your parents are there, you still go through it because maybe that parent isn't as attentive as we talked about in our being present. The one reason we want to be present, like we talked about in that podcast, is because our kids don't want to feel abandoned by us. And so even if they're there, they can feel abandoned and still look for that validation in other people and other things that maybe aren't as fruitful.
Yeah, and as it usually plays out, 2 Timothy 1, which we already read, was God did not give us a spirit of fear. So if we're not living in that operating system of power, love, and self-control, we're operating in fear. And it does have an effect on how we look at God as well. If I suffer from abandonment, I'm also wondering, where are you, God? It changes the way I look. If I feel rejected by my father, then whenever I read father in Scripture, it really bothers me because I have that connection there. So it's really a big fear that we can see not only drives us personally, but drives our relationship. And if you went back to one of our first 4 or 5 podcasts when we talked a little bit about how this kind of stuff intertwines into our relationship. So if I can understand my spouse a little bit, based on her fears. I don't take it personal, and I'm maybe able to help them navigate through that. And the last one, I think, is a side effect of that one. It's the fear of worthlessness. Am I enough? That's the two questions most people ask: is am I enough, and will I be loved? Those two things really drive us.
Well, and I think that not only comes in relationships, but it comes in things like work. I mean, I talked about up front the fear of failure at work is if you don't feel worthy. I mean, I've gone through those bouts at times throughout my work life. Is am I doing the right thing? Do people look at me in a way that is positive, or do they look at me as, hey, that guy's an idiot? And so I had some validation this week as I went in, and my boss gave me some really good props of making me know that I have been validated and that my ideas are on par with where people think, hey, I'm doing a good job. And so there is that ability to feel worthless in not only life, but in relationships, but also work life and work relationships as well. And I got to say that's something that I've always suffered from, is I've always had that inability to decipher, am I doing good in what I'm, when I'm pouring my life into 8 hours out of the day, 5 days a week, or 9 hours, depending on the day.
He had to clarify that in case his boss was listening. So, and you can see that you spend too much time feeling worthless, then it also trickles back into shame. Then you say, it must be me. There's something wrong with me. I can't accomplish this. It goes back to what you were saying, Jeremy. I really overemphasize what I think people think of me, and that shame is debilitating. And all of these fears, you'll find the origin is how you think. It just really does. And we've talked about it before. We've referred to this verse, but in Proverbs, the Bible says that as a man thinks in his heart, so he is. It doesn't say how God thinks about me, I think. It's how I think about me. And so when I have, psychologists call it cognitive distortions, if I have these thinking patterns or beliefs, these are the origins of fear. And you wanna jump into them right now?
Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about them.
Okay. The number one distorted view is called emotional reasoning. This is where you exchange feelings for reality, and everything we've kind of talked about have both concepts to it. But in other words, if I feel jealous, then you must be cheating on me. If I feel vulnerable, then you must be breaking up with me. If I feel guilty, I must have done something wrong. It seems to work because feelings are important, yet we've exchanged how something feels as opposed to how something is. I don't know if you've had any experience with that with you or with someone. Well,
yeah, and I've seen it with a lot of different people. Is if I feel jealous, then you must be cheating on me.
Yeah.
Well, now I'm trying to make that a reality because that's what I'm feeling, right?
Correct.
So I'm looking into it. I'm searching. I'm searching for all the times where that might be happening, and it's not only something that causes that fear, but it causes me to continue to go down that road of negativity, right?
Yep.
And it continues to manifest itself after manifesting itself. And as I find things that, wait a second, this happened, and so I saw that they were texting and they shut it off right when I came into the room, or that they're on the phone, they got off right away. Now that manifests itself into, okay, hey, that just validates my fear.
Correct.
And it keeps on going. Negativity keeps on piling on because you're trying to make that thing, even though it might not be happening, it might be happening, but it might not be happening, and you're making it into a bigger issue than it actually is because you want to validate that fear in your life.
And that's how powerful fear is an operating system. So and it's human nature. We see what we want to see, we hear what we want to hear, and we end up finding the results we want to find, and it doesn't necessarily have to be true. I mean, you find that in all relationship coaching, it's this embedded jealousy, and so if I'm looking for it, it's a fundamental principle. If I go to your house, Jeremy, and as I'm driving there, I want to find something wrong, I guarantee I'll find something wrong when I get there. If I'm going over there saying I want to find good stuff and have a good time, I'm probably going to find great stuff and have a good time. So fear kind of changes the place and where it's like a crossroad in your life, and you should have gone left into the mindset God gave you of power, love, and self-control, but I went right into fear, and it dictates all the way I think. And then, as you said, it's compounding. Fear upon fear equals more fear, and then more fear equals paranoia, and that's really driven to the end extreme. That's when people feel hopeless and like, why do I go on? So emotional reasoning is a big one. The second one is what they call mind reading. That's assuming that I know what someone else is thinking, and it makes me fearful. Such as if I'm just ridden with insecurities, which means I don't like myself. I walk into a room and someone looks at me and I'm like, do you see the way they looked at me? They think, and then I assume, and I am put in their head what I think they're thinking, and it keeps people, like you said, that one girl isolates them. I don't even want to go out because I know what people are thinking.
Well, and I think that kind of feeds into something that I have, which is a social anxiety. Mm-hmm. I can, like yesterday, I went to this conference at a church that I used to be a part of, and my buddy invited me to kind of promote this podcast and to talk to people and have kind of a booth. And this is the very thing that I hate in life is trying to cold come into a conversation, like kind of like cold calling in a sales thing. Is I don't like going up to people and introducing the conversation and really initiating and engaging it.
What's your fear behind that, though? Why is that the case? What initial fear?
Initial fear is that the validation of, okay, they don't want to talk and they want to walk away, and you. The second is just kind of because I feel like there's a social regression in me at some points, that probably stems from being around 16 and moving away from all the social interaction that I had. Yep. I've kind of processed through that a little bit, but it's just the concept that I'm gonna not have something fruitful to say, or the things that I say are just gonna sound stupid. I have an insecurity there of being able to socially keep a conversation going, and knowing when to get out, knowing when those natural cues come. I just don't necessarily have that discernment because of that regression I think I had, and so it's like I don't want to become a hindrance on people, and I don't want them to think they have to keep the conversation going. So I'd rather not start the conversation, so that they don't feel like they have to talk to me, I guess, if that makes sense. I'm working this all out in my mind right now. Yeah. So I go through that.
It's going to cost you $150 at the end of this podcast. Right. So, okay.
But I have a lot of that social anxiety, and it's that fear in that just I don't want to engage because of all those different things that are going on in my head.
So have you held that fear long enough that it's become a truth to you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so it comes to a point where I don't even want to go to these things. Like yesterday, as I'm driving, I'm having to change that thinking. Yep. You know what? I need to think of this as I have an opportunity to talk to people and maybe help them out as I'm sitting here. And don't think of it as promoting the podcast and engaging them in something they probably don't even want to talk about, but instead just talk to them on a human level.
Yep.
And so I did that. There was one point where I looked over at some of the teenagers that were walking by, and I'm like, I wonder about that sticker, that all the stickers they put on their bottles. I'm going to talk to them about that and what the meaning behind all those stickers is, because it's something I've wondered about. So I'm going to ask them about it. And we had a pretty decent conversation for about 10 minutes about that. And nothing about the podcast came up. It was just a conversation to have. So, and then there's other ones where I was having conversations with people and we're talking about things, and I found places to interject off of experience that I've had, and had nothing to do with podcast again, but it was just having great conversations with people here and there that where they built me up and I built them up.
But you had to fight through those fears.
Exactly. And that I had to fight through the negative fears on the way there in order to get my thinking to a place where that could happen.
And as human nature is, the next time you go to a place, you're going to have to do the same process because you've held on to this way of thinking for 30 something years that you don't leave it with just one event.
Yeah.
So when you have that mind reading, which you assume you know what people are thinking, that can paralyze you, and you either think people are judging you or you think they're rejecting you. And and there's no arguing that. There's nothing I could have probably said to you. You had to work it through yourself. I could have given you all those points and you would have fought me on every one of them. Yeah, you're right. But when we'll talk about that when we give a couple tips at the end, like how do you fight these cognitive dysfunctional thinking. So there was the emotional reasoning, which feelings override reality. Then there's mind reading. The last one I think is equally as powerful, that distorts us and makes us fearful, is personalization, where we just take responsibility for everything. Even if it's not my fault. That's a lot of pressure to live under, which will keep you from integrating in society as well. If I'm going to take responsibility for everything that happens, so it's so if my husband's grumpy, I must have done something wrong. If my wife is sad, I must have made her sad. You find a reason to do. That's a heavy load to live under. Have you ever experienced anything like that?
I think there's times where you can be with someone and their mood can change. It's not so much, hey, I came home and my wife's in a bad mood, I must have done something wrong, let me figure it out. But it's more of, hey, we've been together for the last 5 hours and all of a sudden she's in a bad mood. What did I say? What did I do? Mm-hmm. That caused that. But I also think it's not a fear, for me at least. It's not something that I fear. What did I do? It's more of something like, let's figure out what we need to fix, because I would rather fix it than continue to have her be in a bad mood and figure out what I did so that I can learn from it and become a better husband in that way. So for me, it's not fear, but I think I understand how other people can say, okay, they're in a bad mood. So what did I do? Oh my gosh. I come from this place where bad relationships have been in my past. Yeah. I don't want to lose this person. Yeah. I think to a certain extent, going back to our podcast on different things, is I feel like there's that certainty there, that I don't have to worry about that, or that I don't worry about that so much. I do sometimes, but not in that specific moment.
And when you do think about it, it's probably pretty accurate that you were guilty.
Yeah. I think even if I wasn't, I am.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is I think we covered that in the marriage seminar part 2, that happy wife, happy life kind of thing. But even from a counseling perspective, this personalization takes over for that too. Like especially when you find someone who is abused and have to realize, it wasn't your fault you were raped. It wasn't your fault you were sexually abused. They personalize that and they think I didn't do enough. And that kind of fear-driven life is paralyzing.
Or if I didn't go here, if I didn't do this, then that wouldn't have happened. Yep. And it's not that you shouldn't have lived your life. It's that this person was a messed up person. Yeah. I want to say other things right now, but this person was so messed up that it didn't matter if it was you or if it was someone else, it would have been,
I was watching a documentary the other day of a firefighter in New York during 9/11, and he had the day off, and he lives with this, what they call a survivor guilt. He's personalized it to the point that if I would have been at work that day, I could have saved one of my buddies. Is it possible? It may be possible, but we don't know that. And this paralyzing, dysfunctional thought has caused him to question everything. He lives a fear-driven life, and that's not the kind of life what Jesus said, I come to give you not just life. This fits life because all these thoughts are how life works. But he said, I come to give you more. I come to give you an abundant life. And when you live in fear, you can't live in fear and live in an abundant life.
Yeah. When you live in fear and you live in negativity, it's not going to, again, like I said at the start, you're not going to grow. You're not going to become the person you want to be. In the words of Jersey Shore, you're not going to live your best life ever. And yes, I just went to Jersey Shore, but
great theologians on Jersey Shore.
I've been thinking, I've been thinking about it since I watched some recent episodes. Is they have this saying, live your best life. Yep. I'm living my best life, and I think that's what God's saying in this thing. He wants you to live your best life. And so if you're in fear, if you're in this negative aspects, if you're going down the rabbit hole into this negativity, then it's going to be very hard for you to get out of that, and B, to come to a more fruitful place where you can succeed and live your best life.
Yep, which is a great thing to strive for. So you say, you know what, I find myself in one of those categories. Some of those really resonate in me. So it's nice that you make me aware of that, but what do I do? And actually, Jeremy already gave you a little bit of an insight of what to do on his drive up to that church yesterday. Is first of all, you have to be aware. Self-awareness is so big. It's so much better and deeper than self-help. Self-awareness, which means if I find myself in a mood change or all of a sudden a flush of my insecurities, I know something's up. I know at this point I have to address something. So the first thing you do is challenge your assumptions, because you've been lying to yourself for so long. So as you were driving up to that church, Jeremy, your thought was, no one wants to talk to me. How did you challenge that thought?
It was just kind of a weird situation where I just said, you know what, this isn't true. And if I'm going up here and I keep that thought, no one will talk to me.
Self-fulfilling prophecy, huh?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I need to change this mindset. I need to change this thing so that this becomes something actually worth doing. And so that I can actually, if again, we go back to our purpose contentment, our purpose, podcast from a while ago, is if my purpose, as I said there, is I think helping people and loving on people, well then having this mindset is not fulfilling that, so I need to change this mindset.
Yeah. So when you challenge your assumption, you're actually looking for evidence. I feel like my husband's cheating on me. That's emotional reasoning. I know what he's thinking when he looked at that girl. I must not be enough for him. You challenge every one of those. You need to find tangible evidence that would be accessible to court, because other than that, you will believe the lie. So challenging your assumptions is probably the number one thing. Number two is that you act as if you feel confident. It's a little bit of what happens in visualization. So if I act confident, I have a better chance of becoming confident, because if you act like you feel confident, your feelings will follow behind. It's a lady who was working through, they're trying to repair their marriage, and he didn't cheat on her per se, but it's an emotional affair. So in a sense, that's cheating, and she's struggling with trust. I get it. So now that he's done everything asked of him and become just a stellar client, and really God's had real growth in his life, she still cannot get past the fear that it's going to happen again, or maybe he's doing it. So I told her this week, you're going to have to act as if you were confident. So she told me how that worked out. He was in the shower, his phone rang, and her temptation at that point was to grab the phone, see who called, and while it was open, scroll through all his text messages and work it against the timeline of his calendar so she could guarantee that he wasn't doing what he said he did or was where he said. And she goes, I looked at that phone and I thought, what would a confident person do? And she goes, I picked up the phone, I put it on his wallet in the bedroom, and I walked away. And I said, so how did you feel after that? She goes, the first 2 steps away, I felt stupid, like I lost an opportunity to catch him. But the rest of the time, I thought, this is what a confident person does. So not only do you challenge those assumptions, you act like a confident person did. And sometimes it just boils down to, if I don't trust my spouse, I'm going to trust God. I'm going to trust God to expose something. That way I can still work on my marriage. I think as we're talking through this whole series about having our past series about purpose and having a great life, fear is one of the greatest derailers, and I'm not even sure we understand it was fear. I hope today shed a little bit of light on the fact that maybe we're a little more fear-driven than we understand.
Yeah, and so again, becoming aware of your fear is crucial. Becoming aware of the things that drive you is crucial in all different aspects of your life. So become aware of those things. And then as you become aware of those things, let's dispel those fears, those negative components, by thinking critically of how they might be positive, by doing all the things that Gary talked about in that tangible thing. a tangible part of our podcast is let's actually become confident. Let's actually rethink things. Let's actually, start reviewing how things are before they happen and changing our mindset going into it. I think those things will help propel us forward into a place that we can grow, where we can become more fruitful, and succeed, as well as become more enabled to be used for God's purposes. Mm-hmm. Because if we're living in fear, we're not willing to step out and be bold. Yep. And that's what it comes down to as well. Is we need to be bold, and we need to say yes to the things that God is entrusting us with, that he is asking us to do, and that he is moving us to. We need to say yes to growth. We need to say yes to becoming the best versions of ourselves, and continuing to become a better person, a better holistically, overall, spiritually, emotionally, physically, a better person. So let's do those things this week and analyze those things as they come along, and really think about what is driving you not to do things, what is driving your mindsets, and hopefully that helps you out. And this week it's really helped me out, so I hope that you in turn can feel the same way that I have. Anyways, if you'd like to contact us at all, you can do that a couple different ways, through our social media and through all the things that we do on social platforms. You can go to Facebook or Instagram at RP Podcast, or Twitter at the RP Podcast. Write us a note. Tell us what you think about this Fear series. Ask us questions. You can also listen to all of our podcasts at our website, rppodcast.com/podcast. We'll show you all of our previous podcasts, the ones that we mentioned here, as well as any future podcasts will go on there. And it has all of our podcasting platforms that you can listen and subscribe to, as well as share with others that might be going through this issue. So we're so glad that you're here, that you listened, and we hope that it made an impact in your life, and we are so thankful for that. So have a great week, and we will talk to you next time.